Reading 112 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3. Great Animal House, March 6th, 1948. Further commentary on self-remembering. Work idea. Man is not properly conscious. To become so, he must begin by remembering himself. But first, he must, through observing himself for a long period, realize that he is asleep. Commentary. The work speaks of self-remembering from several different angles. The first is that man, capable of 4 states of consciousness, knows only 2 states, the so-called waking state, which he takes as full consciousness, and sleep. However, both of these states are called sleep by the work. For this reason, it speaks of humanity asleep, of the evils of life being incurable as long as man is asleep, and so on. It says that man should, normally, be in the 3rd state of consciousness, which it calls the state of self-remembering, self-awareness, and self-consciousness, and was born to be in this state. But man fell asleep through hypnotism. This part of the teaching we are studying is of such importance that it must be repeated often. In observing other people, in observing the world, in observing ourselves, we gradually realize that the reason why things are as they are is because man is in hypnotic sleep. This is the real explanation. And this idea has been taught for thousands of years. But so powerful is the hypnotism playing on mankind, on earth, that it is not realized. Man is hypnotized into believing he is awake, fully conscious, that he has real being, real will, real I, and that he knows himself and can do. He cannot see that he is a machine, and that everything he does, the machine is doing, and that he ascribes to himself 1,001 things that he does not possess. For, as Gurdjieff said once, this sleep of man, of which I am speaking, is not ordinary sleep, but hypnotic sleep. Now let us speak of self-remembering from another angle. The question might be asked, if, as you say, the work teaches that the normal state of consciousness in a man should be that of self-remembering, could you express in some way the difference between a man who remembers himself and a man who does not remember himself and lives in the so-called waking state of consciousness? The answer that the work gives to such a question is yes. The difference can be expressed in a very clear way. The act of self-remembering creates new energies which are not formed in a man asleep. Now, to begin with, to understand what is meant, it is necessary to study the 3 foods of man and the transformations of these 3 foods that take place in the human machine. I will begin in this commentary by asking you if you believe that a man, by self-remembering, could keep himself alive for a longer time than another man who did not self-remember, supposing they were experiencing the same difficulties, such as inadequate food, exposure, etc. From the work point of view, the answer is yes. Why? Because the man who self-remembers actually creates energies by the transformation of the food of impressions. The work teaches that man lives on 3 foods, not 1 food. The most important food is called impressions. The next important is air. The least important is food, ordinary food. Without impressions, a man cannot live for a moment. Without air, he cannot live for a minute. Without food, he can live for a month or more. Now, ordinary food on entering the body undergoes successive transformations into finer and finer substances. Everything in nature works by transformations. The egg is transformed stage by stage into a bird or snake, the seed into a tree. It is strange how many people look on this word transformation with suspicion, not seeing that their very existence was brought about by a series of transformations in the womb, of which they know nothing, and that the fact that they are alive is due to transformations going on at every moment in their bodies. They take themselves for granted and see no mystery anywhere. This is the trouble. Man, taking everything for granted, cannot grow, cannot develop. The sense of the miraculous is stifled. The wonder of his own existence simply does not enter his limited consciousness. Let us speak further about transformation. The fire on your hearth is burning by transformation. The grass is growing through transformation. The grub turning into a butterfly is transformation. The thought in your mind is transformed into speech. Everything, seen psychologically, spiritually, is transformation. Yes, everything is transformation, save in regard to man, at one place. That place is where impressions are received. We do not transform what our eyes see and our ears hear. Food received from the mouth is transformed first by the stomach. Air is transformed by the lungs. But impressions entering the brain are not transformed. This is the point that the work lays such emphasis upon. Here, at the point where the entry of impressions is marked, you will notice that they do not pass on to anything finer. They remain as 48. The work teaches that if a man remembers himself, 48 will pass on to 24 and 12. At this place, the first conscious shock is given and is called the shock of self-remembering. From what has been said, you will see that this shock must lead to transformation. As ordinary food is transformed for us without aid, so the food of impressions must be transformed in some similar way. But as we are, it is not transformed. Beefsteaks, as it were, remain beefsteaks. Well, if that were the case as regards ordinary food, we would die. Now you receive your life problems, your life situations, your life conundrums, as impressions. This aspect of life enters not as physical beefsteaks, but in another form. We are exposed to the food of literal beefsteaks occasionally, and we have the apparatus given us to digest, that is, transform them. But we do not, and I notice cannot, take in the corresponding idea that we are exposed to situations, problems, and so on, psychically, spiritually. Can you see that a situation, arriving suddenly as, how awful, X has quarreled with his wife, or I have lost a packet on the gold cup, etc., are all beefsteaks, as it were, coming in via impressions. That is, mainly through the eyes and ears, those other mouths in our faces distinct from nose and mouth. Each apparatus takes in different material, and as was said, we have for nose and air a transforming thing called the lungs, and for mouth and food a transforming thing called the stomach. But, to repeat, we have no transforming thing for impressions, and we have to create it ourselves. This is why the work is called psychotransformism. We have to learn how to transform impressions, which are psychological. Otherwise, life will remain undigested, untransformed, in which case there will be no inner development. Remember that man was, according to the work, made a self-developing organism. Now, to transform life, it is necessary to receive impressions in a new way, and this is called the first conscious shock, given the name of self-remembering. Now a man asleep identifies with every situation, that is, with every impression coming in via eyes or ears. If he had no eyes or ears, the situations that he suffers from all day long would not exist for him. So do you see that your psychological life, your problems, your worries, and so on, are all due to impressions entering the eyes and ears? And let me emphasize how you react to these impressions. Once you begin to grasp this, once you see what is meant, you begin to enter this work in a real sense. When a man remembers himself at a difficult moment, when he might easily identify with everything, he is beginning to give himself the first conscious shock. In answer to the question, could you express the difference between a man asleep and a man self-remembering in some way? The difference is expressed in the two diagrams that follow.